My wife declared our marriage was on her terms, so my quiet revenge took back control and exposed her cheating in public, ending her power for good. I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't the first time she had tried to control me. Far from it. Over the years I had learned to let things slide, to pick my battles, to keep the peace. But something about this moment was different. Maybe it was the sheer arrogance in her voice, the way she slammed her hand on the table as if she were delivering an absolute decree. "This marriage is on my terms, or it's nothing," she said. She was so sure of herself, so confident that I would do what I had always done, nod, sigh, and fall in line. But this time, I didn't. I could feel her waiting for my reaction, expecting the usual frustration, an argument, maybe even a half-hearted protest before ultimately backing down. But I didn't give her any of that. Instead, I smiled, not out of amusement, not out of kindness, just a small, knowing smile. "All right," I said, my voice calm, almost casual. "Then let's play by your rules." For a moment she hesitated. I could see the confusion flicker across her face just for a split second before she regained her composure. She thought she had won. In her mind, my words meant surrender. That was her first mistake. I didn't argue, I didn't fight, I didn't try to reason with her. I just let it sink in. She scoffed, rolling her eyes, already shifting her attention elsewhere. In her mind, the conversation was over. She had set the terms, she had won. But what she didn't realize was that something inside me had snapped. This wasn't about a single argument. It wasn't about whatever small, meaningless thing we had been fighting about in the first place. No, this was about years of this same pattern. Her making the rules, her deciding how things would go, her dictating every part of my life while I bent over backward to accommodate her. Not anymore. That night, I didn't bring it up again. I didn't sulk. I didn't retaliate. I didn't even act any differently. I simply carried on as usual, letting her believe she was still in control. But in my mind, the game had already begun. I started observing, paying attention to every little thing, how often she used her so-called authority to dictate my choices, how she twisted things to always suit her, how she reacted whenever I dared to express my own opinions. I had spent years ignoring it, but now I was taking notes. And then I started making changes, subtle at first. I stopped asking for permission. When she tried to dictate what I should wear the next morning, I simply put on what I wanted. When she gave me a schedule for my weekend, I made other plans without consulting her. When she tried to cut off a conversation between me and a friend she didn't approve of, I ignored her and kept talking. I wasn't being rude. I wasn't being aggressive. I was just opting out of playing by her rules. She noticed. At first, it was small comments, passive-aggressive remarks about how I was acting strange or being difficult. But I didn't react. I didn't argue. I just let her feel the shift. And then came the first real test. A few nights later, she asked me where I was going. Normally, I would have given her an explanation, reassured her, made sure she was okay with it before I left. But this time, I said simply, "Out," grabbing my keys. Her eyes narrowed. "Where? Does it matter?" She actually took a step back, caught off guard. This was new. This was not how our conversations usually went. "I just don't understand why you're being like this," she said, arms crossed. "You usually tell me where you're going." "I used to," I admitted. "But I figured since this marriage is on your terms, I might as well adjust." I saw it hit her then, a flicker of realization, a flash of unease. She didn't say anything else. She just let me leave. That was the moment I knew she was starting to lose control, and I had just gotten started. The first few days after that night, she didn't know what to make of me. She watched me closely, waiting for me to return to normal, to slip back into the person she had always controlled. But that man was gone. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped checking in. I stopped asking for anything. And the silence, that was what got to her the most. Before she could count on me to react, to engage in her games, to push back just enough for her to feel justified in playing the victim. But now, I gave her nothing. No arguments, no frustration, no attempts to reason with her. I was done fighting for something that was never a partnership to begin with. I wasn't cold. I wasn't cruel. I was just distant, detached, unbothered. And that terrified her. One morning, she walked into the kitchen while I was having coffee. Normally, she would have dictated my schedule before I even finished my first sip. Instead, she just stood there, hesitant. "You're up early," she said, testing the waters. "Yep." She waited for me to say more. I didn't. "So, what's your plan today?" I shrugged. "Haven't decided yet." That was a lie. I had plans, ones that had nothing to do with her, but I wasn't giving her the satisfaction of knowing where I was going or what I was doing. She frowned. "Well, I thought we could—" "I'll be out most of the day," I cut in, setting my mug down. She blinked, caught off guard, doing what I smirked. Does it matter? Her jaw tightened. She hated that answer. For years, I'd been expected to give full reports on my whereabouts, my choices, my actions. But now, she was the one left in the dark. And that was just the beginning. That evening, I came home late. I didn't text, I didn't call. I walked in calm and relaxed, like I had all the time in the world. She was waiting for me in the living room, arms crossed, trying to mask her irritation with forced indifference. You didn't answer my texts, she said. I saw them, I replied, tossing my keys onto the table. Silence. Her lips pressed together as she processed my response. I could see the frustration bubbling beneath the surface. She wanted to yell, to demand an explanation, to pull me back into the cycle, but she couldn't because I wasn't giving her an opening. She scoffed, shaking her head. You're acting weird, I smirked. Or maybe you're just not used to me having my own life. That shut her up real quick. She spent the next few days testing different tactics. First, she tried to pretend nothing had changed, asking me what I wanted for dinner, making casual conversation, acting like everything was normal. When that didn't work, she tried provoking me. Subtle jabs, comments designed to push my buttons. You've been so distant. Are you seeing someone else? If you don't want to be here, why don't you just leave? I never took the bait. And when none of that worked, she resorted to what she did best, control. One night, she sat across from me at dinner and dropped her first real attempt at regaining power. Since you've been so independent lately, she said, feigning nonchalance, I figured we should talk about finances. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my drink. Oh yeah? She continued. Since I'm always the one managing the money, I think it's only fair that we reevaluate our accounts, see how we can balance things out. I nearly laughed. She wasn't talking about balance, she was talking about leverage. For years, she had used money as just another tool of control, dictating how much I could spend, questioning every financial decision I made, making sure I always felt like I needed her approval. But I had already seen this move coming. I pulled out my phone and tapped a few times before setting it down on the table. Actually, I said, meeting her gaze, I already took care of that. Her expression shifted. What do you mean? I transferred all the joint accounts into your name, I said casually. Since you like handling things your way, I figured you could manage all the expenses too. The color drained from her face. You what? I shrugged. You want control? You got it. Every bill, every payment, it's all yours now. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I could see the calculations happening in real time, the realization that she had just lost the very power she thought she was reinforcing. That's not, she started, but I cut her off. It's exactly what you wanted, I said, standing up. I'm just following your rules. And with that, I left her sitting there, speechless. She thought she was playing chess, but I was already 10 moves ahead. She didn't take it well. The moment I walked away, I could feel her anger simmering behind me, but I didn't turn around. I didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing if I cared, because I didn't. I had spent years walking on eggshells, years trying to anticipate her moods, years adjusting myself to fit the ever-changing set of rules she imposed. But that version of me was gone, and she was just now realizing it. The next morning she tried to act like nothing had happened. She moved around the house with a forced casualness, her voice overly neutral, her actions a little too deliberate. She wanted to pretend that my decision to dump all the financial responsibility on her didn't bother her, but I knew better. She had spent years holding money over my head, making sure I always needed her permission for every purchase, every expense. She thought she was securing her power. But now that weight was entirely on her shoulders, and she had no one to blame but herself. I sat in the kitchen, drinking my coffee, scrolling through my phone like I didn't have a care in the world. She hovered nearby, waiting for me to acknowledge her, but I didn't. Finally, she snapped, so that's it, she blurted out. You just expect me to handle everything now? I looked up, raising an eyebrow. You always said you were in charge, didn't you? Her mouth opened, then closed. She was looking for an argument, some way to spin this in her favor, but she was grasping at nothing. This is childish, she scoffed. You're just trying to punish me. I leaned back, letting out a short laugh. Punish you? No, I'm just giving you what you asked for. You wanted everything on your terms, remember? Her fingers curled into fists. That's not what I meant, and you know it. Oh, I know exactly what you meant, I said, setting down my mug. You wanted control, but only when it benefited you. The second it actually comes with responsibility, you don't want it anymore. She glared at me, breathing heavily, but she didn't have a comeback. I pushed my chair back and stood up. Don't worry, you've got this. I believe in you. Then I walked away, leaving her standing there, furious and powerless. And that was only the beginning. Over the next few days, I watched as she struggled to keep up. Bills started piling up. Responsibilities she had never really handled before were now entirely on her. I didn't offer to help. I didn't ask if she was managing. I just let her deal with it. She tried shifting gears, thinking maybe she could regain control in other ways. One night I was sitting on the couch watching TV when she walked in, her expression softer, her tone more measured. "I think we should start working together again," she said, sitting down next to me. "I mean, we've always been a team, right?" I didn't even look away from the screen. A team. That's funny. I don't remember ever having a say in this team. She sighed, clearly trying to keep herself from snapping. "You're being ridiculous. You know what I mean." I turned to her, finally giving her my full attention. "No, I don't think I do. Because when you had all the power, it was your way or nothing. And now, suddenly, you want compromise? That's convenient." She clenched her jaw. "Fine, if you want to act like an expletive, then go ahead." I smirked. "I'm just following your example." She stormed off, slamming the door behind her. It was getting to her. Her frustration, her helplessness. It was written all over her. She had spent so long believing she had me completely under her thumb, and now, for the first time, she was the one scrambling for control. And she still had one more thing to lose, because up until this point, the battle had been between us, behind closed doors. But soon, everyone else would see the cracks. And when that happened, there would be nowhere left for her to hide. She had spent the past few weeks pretending to be in control, convincing herself that she could turn things around. But deep down, she knew she was losing. She was exhausted, barely holding things together, and no matter how hard she tried to act like everything was fine, I could see the cracks forming. She thought I didn't notice how she lingered at the kitchen table late at night, staring at unpaid bills, how she checked her phone every few minutes, waiting for a text from me that would never come, how she kept trying to insert herself into my life, asking where I was going, what I was doing, only to be met with the same calm, detached response. Does it matter? She was unraveling, but she still had one last illusion to cling to, her reputation. She had spent years crafting the image of a perfect wife, a woman who ran her household with authority, a woman who had me wrapped around her finger. To the outside world, she was strong, confident, untouchable, and she was desperate to keep it that way, so when she received an invitation to a dinner party with our friends and family, I wasn't surprised when she insisted we attend. "It'll be good for us," she said, forcing a smile, "a chance to show everyone we're still solid." I almost laughed. She wasn't doing this for us, she was doing it for herself. She thought she could use this night to reassert control, to remind everyone, and maybe even herself, that she was still in charge. I decided to let her have this moment, but I also knew this would be the night everything collapsed around her. We arrived at the dinner, and she was in full performance mode. She greeted people with a bright, confident smile, her laughter just a little too loud, her grip on my arm a little too tight. She wanted me to play along, to fall back into my old role, the agreeable husband who followed her lead. But I wasn't that man anymore. As the night went on, she tried to guide the conversation, making little comments about how things were back to normal and how we had worked through some things, as if our marriage had just gone through a rough patch and not a complete collapse. I let her talk. I let her spin her story. And then I decided to remind her this wasn't her narrative to control anymore. I leaned back in my chair, took a sip of wine, and spoke in the same casual, even tone I had used so many times before. "It's funny," I said, setting my glass down. "She always said this marriage was on her terms, so I figured, why not let her handle everything?" The table went quiet. She froze. "Oh yeah," I continued, looking around. "She wanted full control, so I made sure she had it. Gave her the house, put all the bills in her name, everything she always wanted." I could see the panic flash in her eyes. She forced a nervous laugh. "You're making it sound like you ran everything?" I interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "I mean, that's what you always said, wasn't it?" A few people chuckled awkwardly. She shifted in her seat, her fingers tightening around her wine glass. I wasn't raising my voice. I wasn't angry. I was just laying out the facts, and she hated it. She tried to recover, steering the conversation away, but it was too late. The energy at the table had shifted. People were paying attention now. So I decided to end the game. I pulled out my phone, scrolled for a second, then turned the screen toward her. "By the way," I said casually, "remember that business meeting you had last week? Thought you'd want to see this?" Her face drained of color. The table went silent. She stared at the screen, her hands trembling slightly. The picture was right there, her sitting in a restaurant, leaning in way too close to a man that wasn't me. I had known for weeks I had let her dig her own grave. She looked up at me, her lips slightly parted, searching for something, an excuse, a lie, anything that could save her. But there was nothing left to say. I stood up, adjusted my jacket, and looked at her one last time. "You were right," I said. "This marriage was only ever on your terms." I picked up my keys, nodded at the stunned faces around the table, and walked toward the door. She didn't follow me because, for the first time in her life, she had nothing left to control. I walked out of that dinner without looking back. There was no hesitation, no second guessing, no moment of doubt. I had given her every opportunity to change, to see what was happening, to realize that the power she thought she held was slipping through her fingers. But she never saw it, not until it was too late. The moment I stepped outside, I took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, it actually felt like I could breathe. No weight, no constant tension, no waiting for the next fight. I drove home alone, and I didn't even check my phone. I already knew what was happening back at the restaurant. She was unraveling in front of everyone. She had built her life around control. Her entire identity was wrapped up in making sure she was the one in charge, the one dictating the rules, the one managing the narrative, the one everyone else had to answer to. And in just a few short weeks, I had taken all of it from her. Now she had to face reality. I didn't stay at the house that night. There was no reason to. I had already made my decision, and I wasn't about to give her another chance to spin things in her favor. She had spent too many years manipulating situations to work for her, twisting conversations to make herself the victim. Not this time. Instead, I checked into a hotel, turned off my phone, and slept better than I had in years. The next morning, I finally turned my phone back on. The messages flooded in. "Where are you? We need to talk. You humiliated me. This is your fault. You're making a huge mistake. We can fix this." I didn't respond. Instead, I made a few calls, to my lawyer, to a realtor, to a moving company. The divorce was already in motion. By the time I did go back to the house, she was waiting for me. She looked different. Tired, hollow, defeated. For the first time in our entire marriage, she didn't have that same arrogance in her posture. "You really think this is the right move?" she asked, her voice quieter than usual. "I know it is," I replied. She swallowed, trying to keep herself composed. "I don't want to do this." I exhaled, shaking my head. "That's the thing. You never wanted to do any of this. You just wanted to keep me in a place where you could control me." Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't argue. She knew. "You made the rules," I continued, "and for years I played by them. But now I don't have to anymore." She clenched her jaw, blinking rapidly. For the first time, she was truly afraid, not of losing me, but of losing the control she had spent so long holding on to. The divorce moved fast. I had been prepared. Every document, every asset, every account. I had already made sure there was no way for her to drag things out. She tried, of course. She threw every last desperate attempt at me. Apologies, accusations, tears, threats. Nothing worked. She was alone in this fight, and the more people found out about what had really happened, the faster her empire crumbled. Friends who had once admired her strong personality suddenly weren't so supportive. Family members who used to take her side started asking questions she couldn't answer. She wasn't the victim in this story. She was the reason it all fell apart. And the best part? I didn't have to do anything else. She was living with the consequences she had created. After the divorce was finalized, I expected her to lash out one last time, a final desperate attempt to regain control, to rewrite the story in a way that made her look like the victim. But instead, she disappeared. Not physically. She was still around, still existing in the same social circles, still trying to maintain some sense of normalcy. But the woman who once ruled over my life with absolute authority was gone. She wasn't feared anymore. She wasn't respected. She wasn't even pitied. She was just irrelevant. For years she had controlled everything, every conversation, every decision, every aspect of my life. And now she had nothing left to hold on to. No husband to command, no reputation to protect, no power to wield. And the worst part? She knew it. I moved out of the house immediately. I had no attachment to it, no desire to linger in the place that had once felt more like a prison than a home. The day the movers came, she was there. Not to argue, not to plead, just watching. I didn't acknowledge her. There was nothing left to say. She tried, though, of course she did. "You're really just going to walk away from everything?" I didn't stop packing. "There's nothing left here for me. We had a life together," she pushed. "That has to mean something." I turned to her then, really looking at her. Not the version of her I had spent years trying to please, but the woman she actually was. The one who had spent our entire marriage making sure I knew my place, making sure I never forgot that I was under her rule. "It did mean something," I admitted. "It meant that I let you control me for far too long, and now it means nothing." She flinched at that, because for once, she couldn't twist my words, couldn't manipulate the situation to make herself the victim. She had lost. The first few months after the divorce were freeing. There was no tension waiting for me at home, no battles over the smallest decisions, no constant weight pressing down on me, reminding me that my thoughts, my wants, my needs would never come first. I had control over my own life for the first time in years, and I wasn't going to waste it. She, on the other hand, couldn't escape the reality she had created. The people who once admired her dominance now avoided her. The ones who used to side with her, who blindly supported her version of events, were now questioning everything. They had seen the truth, and there was no coming back from that. Her empire had crumbled, her influence gone. She had spent so long believing she was untouchable, believing she could bend reality to her will. But now she was just another cautionary tale. Another person who pushed too hard, controlled too much, and ended up with nothing. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon. Sometimes, late at night when the world is quiet, I sit on my new balcony with a cup of tea and let myself feel everything. It's strange, this freedom. For years, I lived in a cage I didn't even see, every move calculated to avoid her anger, to meet her expectations, to keep the peace. I thought that was love, bending, shrinking, sacrificing myself to fit into her world. But now, with the weight of her control gone, I realize it was never love. It was survival. And surviving isn't the same as living. There's this lightness in my chest now, like I can finally breathe without checking if I'm allowed to. But it's not all relief. Sometimes, I feel this ache, not for her, but for the version of myself I lost along the way. I think about the man I was before her, the one who laughed louder, dreamed bigger, didn't second-guess every word. I'm finding him again, piece by piece, but it's slow. Some days I'm proud of how far I've come, how I stood up to her, how I walked away without looking back. Other days I'm angry, not at her anymore, but at myself for staying so long, for letting her rules define me. I don't hate her. That surprises me the most. Hate would be easier, I think. It would give me something to hold on to, something to fuel me. But instead, there's just this quiet pity. She built her whole world on control, and now that it's gone, I wonder what she has left. I don't wish her pain, but I don't wish her well either. I just don't think about her much anymore. And that feels like the ultimate victory, not the divorce papers, not the stunned faces at that dinner, but the fact that she no longer takes up space in my head. I'm learning to trust myself again. It's terrifying, like stepping onto a tightrope without a net. But it's also exhilarating. I make choices now, small ones, like what to eat for dinner, and big ones, like where I want my life to go, without her voice in the back of my mind. I'm not perfect. I stumble, I doubt, but I'm free. And for the first time in years, I'm starting to believe that's enough.